The wind howled across the dusty plains of Red Creek as dusk settled into the valley, painting the sky with streaks of dying orange and bruised purple shadows. Clint Maddox, the lone cowboy known across 3 counties for his quiet strength and unshakable grit, rode slowly toward town, reins loose in his hand, his hat pulled low against the cold bite of evening. He had been on the trail for 2 weeks, driving cattle for the Carson Ranch, and though he looked like a man carved out of stone and dust, fatigue tugged at his eyes. As he reached the edge of town, he slowed his horse near the back of the old bakery, an alley folks usually avoided because it stank of sour dough and spoiled flour. But tonight something felt wrong. Something pulled him to look. In the dim glow of the half-dead lantern hanging from a crooked nail, Clint saw movement, small, shivering movement. His brows furrowed. He guided his horse closer, the hooves crunching over gravel. That's when he saw them. 3 children huddled around a dented tin plate, scraping crumbs. Not food, just crumbs. The youngest girl, no more than 5, licked her fingers as if they tasted like magic. The boy beside her tried pretending to chew slowly, stretching out the nothingness on his plate. And beside them, kneeling, her shoulders trembling and her face streaked with exhaustion, was Mara Ellison, the widow the whole town had forgotten the moment her husband died in a mine, collapsed last winter. Clint's breath caught in his throat. The woman who once smiled, brighter than summer sun, now looked like a ghost wearing rags. Her hands shook as she pushed the last piece of stale bread toward her youngest daughter, whispering, "Eat it, sweetheart. Mama's not hungry." But Clint could hear her stomach growl even from where he sat. Something in him snapped, quietly, inwardly, but snapped all the same. He dismounted without a sound, boots hitting the ground with heavy purpose. Mara startled when she noticed him, her eyes widening in alarm, as if expecting judgment or worse, pity. "Mr. Maddox, we were just leaving," she stuttered, trying to gather the kids. But Clint raised a hand gently, not to stop her, but to steady the storm inside himself. "This what you been doing?" he asked softly, voice thick with disbelief. "Feeding your babies trash?" Mara's eyes filled with tears. She tried desperately to hold back. "There's no work left for me," she whispered. "I clean when someone lets me. I sew when someone remembers I exist." "But," her voice cracked, "winter's coming, Clint. We just needed something to get by tonight." The boy, thin as a fence post, stepped in front of his mother, trying to look tough. "We don't need handouts, sir," he said bravely. But Clint saw the truth in his stance, the wobble in his knees, the hunger carved into his cheeks. He crouched, looking the boy in the eye. "Ain't nobody talking handouts," Clint murmured. "I'm talking what's right." He stood to his full height, eyes burning at the cold stars that dared watch such suffering. In that moment, everything about Clint Maddox changed. The man who walked alone, talked little and trusted nobody suddenly, felt a purpose rise in him so fierce it could have lit the whole night sky. He stepped back, took a breath, and said the words that made Mara's world shift on its axis. "Get your things," he said, voice low but unshakably firm. "You're coming home." Mara blinked, confused, overwhelmed. "Clint, what? No, we can't. You barely know us." Clint's jaw tightened. "I know enough. I know no woman and her young'uns should be digging through trash for scraps." She shook her head desperately. "People will talk." "Let 'em," Clint said. "Ain't a soul in this town feeds my horse, buys my boots, or sleeps under my roof. I decide what I do. And right now, I'm taking you home." The children looked at him, as if he were a miracle wrapped in leather and dust. Mara looked at him as if she wanted to believe, but had forgotten how. Clint extended his hand, not as a cowboy offering charity, but as a man making a promise he fully intended to keep. "Nobody deserves the cold, Mara," he said gently. "Least of all you." She hesitated, tears trembling on the edge of her lashes. But the wind grew colder, biting at her children's thin coats. And she knew she couldn't let pride starve them. With a shaking breath, she took Clint's hand. He helped her to her feet, gathered her children close, and led them toward his waiting horse, his voice calm and protective. "We'll get a wagon from the livery," he murmured. "Ain't riding the kids?" through this cold. Mara's daughter tugged on his sleeve timidly. "Mister, are we safe now?" Clint swallowed hard, emotion tugging at a place in his chest he thought long dead. "You're safe now," he answered. "As long as I'm breathing, you'll never eat scraps again." And as the four of them followed him into the deepening night, the town watched from behind shuttered windows, whispers already beginning. But Clint didn't care, because for the first time in a long time, the lonely cowboy felt something warm settle inside him. Purpose, fire, and the beginning of something he didn't yet dare name. But fate had already written it in the stars. This night would change all their lives long before morning came. The next morning rose over Maddox Ranch, with a golden softness that felt like the world itself had decided to give Mara and her children one more chance at life, and for Clint Maddox, who had lived in silence and loneliness for so many years, the sound of children's laughter drifting through his kitchen felt like a miracle stitched into the walls. Mara moved quietly around the room, gently guiding her youngest daughter toward a chair, brushing her son's hair with the care of a mother who finally felt safe enough to breathe. Clint stood at the doorway, leaning against the frame, pretending to check his gloves, but really just watching them, soaking in the sight of a life he never knew he'd wanted until it was right in front of him. There was a softness in Mara today. Sleep had calmed the fear in her eyes. Food had brought color back to her cheeks, and the warmth of the ranch seemed to melt worries she'd been carrying for months. Clint cleared his throat shyly, causing Mara to look up with a small smile. And that smile hit him straight through the chest like a bullet made of sunlight. After breakfast, he took the boy outside, showing him how to throw feed to the hens, how to check the fence line, how to fill the trough. The boy listened like he'd been starving, not just for food, but for guidance, for a man's voice, a man's presence. Every time the boy asked a question, Clint felt his heart tug a little more. Inside the house, Mara was folding blankets when her youngest tugged on her dress and whispered, "Mama, can we stay?" Mara's hands froze, her throat tightening. For so long, she had taught her children not to hope for too much, because hopes had a way of breaking. But before she could answer, Clint stepped into the doorway, wiping his hands on his jeans, his eyes meeting hers with a certainty that made her breath catch. "You can stay as long as you want," he said gently. "This house, it ain't been a home for a long time. I'd be grateful if you'd help me change that." Mara swallowed hard, tears threatening again, not from sadness this time, but from a feeling she had buried beneath layers of fear. Safety. True, solid safety. The kind that wrapped itself around the heart and whispered, "You're not alone anymore." Days passed into weeks, and slowly the ranch began to transform, not because Clint fixed the broken boards or replaced the old hinges, but because Mara brought life into the empty spaces. She planted herbs by the window, patched curtains with careful stitches, packed lunches for Clint when he rode out for the cattle. And Clint, he found himself rushing through chores just to get back and hear how her day went, to listen to her voice, to watch her brush her daughter's hair, to feel the warmth of a home he once believed he didn't deserve. But with every sunset, every shared meal, every quiet conversation on the porch while the children slept inside, something deep and unspoken grew between them, something that scared Mara, because she wasn't sure she had the right to fall in love again, and something that scared Clint even more, because he had never known love at all. One night, when the wind howled against the windows and the lantern flickered low, Clint found Mara standing outside on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, staring at the stars. "You okay?" he asked, stepping beside her. She nodded slowly, though her eyes glistened. "Clint, people in town talk. They say I only came here because I needed saving." Clint exhaled, leaning his hands against the railing. "Folks in town ain't never cared about truth," he said. "They talk because their own lives are empty." Mara turned to him, voice trembling. "But I don't want you to feel stuck with us." He looked at her, then really looked at her, at the woman who had fought storms alone, who had raised her children with nothing but grit and love, who had survived things that would break anyone else. "Mara," he whispered, The night I saw you behind that bakery. I didn't save you. You saved me." She blinked, confused. "How?" Clint's voice softened. "I was living a life that didn't mean nothing. I came home to walls, to silence, to empty plates and empty nights. But when you walked into this house, it felt like someone finally turned the lights on inside me." A tear slipped down Mara's cheek, but Clint brushed it away with a tenderness that made her knees weaken. "I didn't bring you here out of pity," he said. "I brought you here because you're family now. If you want to be." Mara's breath hitched. "I do," she whispered, before she even realized the words were leaving her lips. Clint cupped her face gently, the roughness of his calloused hands contrasting with the softness of her skin. "Then stop worrying about what folks think," he murmured. "You and the kids, you're home, and you ain't never going through another winter alone." Mara stepped closer, resting her forehead against his chest, letting herself feel the safety she had been running from. Clint wrapped his arms around her, sealing a promise without a single spoken vow. Inside, the children slept peacefully, unaware that a new chapter of their lives was being written, right there on the porch under the moonlit sky. And from that night on, the Maddox Ranch wasn't just Clint's land. It was a family's heartbeat, rebuilt from scraps of hope, courage, and a cowboy's unshakable promise to protect the people he loved with every breath he had left.